Imagine, if you will, waking up in the middle of the night, looking at your blinds and seeing a set of eyes peering at you from the dark. Now imagine that same set of eyes looking at you from just above your bed. Hello, true crimers! It's time for another spooky Saturday, and this is gonna be a kind of a short video, and this is the story of the Cape Intruder of Maine. Creeper peeper toms have been around for probably a long time, I'm sure. Gross men, and sometimes the ladies, trying to sneak a peek of something not so nice through a window or a peephole or some sort of hole. And usually it's something sexual in nature is why they do it, because they're gross. We also have grown accustomed, I guess you can say, kind of, to home intruders, home invasions, right? There's been stories in recent memory where people, because nowadays everyone has cameras in their house, people have checked their camera footage the following day because they just felt something was off about last night. And there are images on the internet where people have spotted home intruders peering over them as they slept in bed, maybe peered over them as the person fell asleep on their couch. Some of these men have been caught, some of them have not. One of the ones who have not been caught, well, he was from Maine. This particular event happened in Cape Elizabeth in Maine. It's one of those little seaside towns, right, with everything feels so homey and down to earth, and everyone knows everyone. You got beaches, you got beautiful imagery, you got it all. But what you're not expecting is a creeper. It started in 2005. One night, a woman had fallen asleep in her bed. She lived alone. She had no kids. She had no one staying with her. She woke up with an uneasy feeling. Standing above her bed was a shadow. Was it a ghost? Was it a full body apparition of a spirit who died years ago? Nope. It was a fully living man. He appeared to be wearing a hoodie. She can kind of see his face, and he was just there staring at her, standing directly over her bed, staring, breathing heavily, watching her sleep. But when he noticed that she woke up, the man bolted. He took off. The woman immediately calls 911. What the hell? Someone's broken into my home. Maybe he was going to assault me. I don't know. Police arrive. They dust for fingerprints. They ask her if anything was stolen. Nothing was taken. Not even, clothing items that say maybe someone like this may have tried to steal. There wasn't even any forced entry in her house. This person entered just through an unlocked door or an unlocked window. This is a community where everyone considers it to be, a safe place to be, and sometimes people just forget in communities like that to lock their doors. A couple of nights later, another woman who lives alone, sound asleep in her bed. She hears some rustling, kind of makes her wake up. Her eyes sort of groggily open. That's not even a word, Mike. Well, it is now. She was in such a deep sleep that it's like painful to open her eyes, right? And so as she's rubbing her eyes and looking up, she begins to see something standing at the foot of her bed, looking down at her. It's a man. He's motionless and just standing, staring, breathing. She reacts by screaming. The man takes off. 911 called again. No fingerprints. Nothing stolen. No forced entry. Must have entered through an unlocked door or window. And then it happened again a few nights later. Then it happened again the next night. And then again. And then again. And then again. People were locking their doors now. People were locking their windows. Fear spread across the community. What does this man want? What is he doing? Is he wanting to sexually assault these women? How does he know these women live alone? Who is this man? And they give him just the simple nickname of the Cape Intruder. The communities began to establish neighborhood watches. People would essentially take turns patrolling the streets at night to see if they could catch this man, but he was never caught. Some of the women managed to get a good enough look at this man that they were able to give police a description. And when all of the descriptions came in, they were able to come up with a composite drawing. And all of the women agreed that this is pretty much what the man looked like. So this is that composite drawing of that man. They said he was a white male and appeared to be somewhere in his early to maybe mid-20s. When the image surfaced, some people said, "I think I know who that is." And so police went to the person who everyone thought it was. But it turns out, I guess it wasn't him. I don't know how they ruled him out, but they ruled him out. All of the accounts the women gave were that just he came in quietly and he was just there, it appeared, just to watch them sleep, just to stare at them as they tossed and turned in their bed. Not one woman ever said he tried to touch them. He ever tried to jump on top of them, and every time the person woke up, he ran. It appeared he had no intent to be violent, no intent to sexually assault, no attempt to rob, steal, break anything. He just wanted to break into these women's home, to stare at them in the middle of the night while they slept. And what makes matters even worse is he likely did this to many, many other women and many other households. We only know about the stories where the women woke up. We don't know if he broke into other homes, sat there and stared for hours on end, and then just left. We don't know if he ever tried to perhaps make physical contact with any other women. Maybe he did and they were very sound sleepers. But then, just as quickly as the entire thing started, and as rapid fire as it seemed to happen, it then just ended. February of 2006 was the last reported incident of the Cape Intruder. And since then, he has not been spotted since. It really does make you wonder when you sleep at night, especially to those of you who live alone. Are you truly alone at night? Are all of your doors and windows truly locked? Do you trust your neighbors? Do you trust your friends? Because quite frankly, you never know who could be staring at you as you sleep. But I hope you all have a great night tonight. Have a good sleepy sleeps and try to have pleasant dreams. Just wanted to share this little story with you. So try not to think it may happen because odds are it probably won't happen, but that's it for today's video, true crime-a-roonies or true scare-a-roonies or whatever the hell. A torrid affair, or more appropriately, a menage a trois, it would come to an end, bitterly. And then it would lead to a double homicide in the little small town of McCook, Nebraska. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Harold Nokes. Viewer discretion is advised. In 1973, the little town of McCook, Nebraska consisted of just under 8,000 people. It was a quiet, peaceful, serene, family-friendly town. Crime of any kind was extremely rare. But, as we all know, crime still happens anywhere, no matter how calm, peaceful, and seemingly family-friendly it is. But in McCook, basically everyone knew everyone. It had that small town vibe to it. Everyone was friendly with one another. For the most part, they got along. There was a lot of, it was a big farming community. I think it still kind of is today. But yeah, it was just like it was mainly a farming area. So a lot of big open land. But one day in 1973, the quiet and peacefulness would soon be shattered when several body parts began washing up on shore. Harold Nokes was born on April 19th, 1928 in Danbury, Nebraska. Not a whole lot is known about the guy. At the time of this story, he was 45 years old. He was working as a foreman for Nebraska's State Department of Roads. Also by this time, in 1973, he had been happily, I believe, married to his wife, Ina. And they had been married for about 27 years or so. They had gotten married in April of 1946. That's when I was in my late 60s, I believe. Yeah, fun fact about me. Harold and Ina would go on to have a few kids of their own, and then eventually they got some grandkids. Ina was born Ina Ambler, also in the Danbury, Nebraska area. Both Harold and Ina essentially were born and raised and spent their entire lives in the small community of Nebraska. By all accounts, the Nokes family seemed to be very wholesome. No scandals, nothing. Just a very friendly family that everyone knew and everyone liked. That would all change again in 1973 when body parts wrapped in paper had begun to wash up on the shores of the Harry Strunk Reservoir. There were two bodies, a man and a woman, and they would be identified as Edwin and Wilma Hoyt. Let's go back a couple of years, shall we? Somewheres around 1969 or 1970, the Nokes would meet a woman in her 20s, her name Kay Hine. Kay was married to a man named Dwayne, and so Kay and Dwayne became friends with Harold and Ina. But then Kay and Dwayne, they got divorced. Kay would spend more and more time with her friends, the Nokes, and they did what most friends do. They formed a threesome. They started going to Boinktown, USA as a trio. Nothing wrong with that. Harold and Ina had welcomed Kay into their bedroom, where a menage a trois would be produced. It would go on for about 2 or 3 years. That's pretty lengthy. But I guess this relationship, or whatever you want to call it, it would hit a rocky patch. There would be turmoil. There would be some tension. There would be fighting amongst the three. Emotions ran rampant, and Kay, apparently, during one of the sexual escapades, got herself a concussion. I don't know what you guys are doing. Maybe, I guess the headboard was a rocket a little too hard. So there was infighting, basically. And Kay decided that, you know what, maybe it's time to call this off. Maybe this is just not it anymore. And Kay alleges that from that point on, Harold Nokes began to blackmail her, threatened to expose her as a sexual deviant, the works. Kay allegedly tried to take her own life from this. Thankfully, it failed. When she attempted that, and I don't know the circumstances of all of this and like how it came to be, but this is when Kay's parents would enter the picture. And this is all happening, by the way, in the summer of 1973. Kay's parents were Edwin and Wilma Hoyt. Edwin Hoyt was born on January 18th, 1918. And he lived his entire life in McCook, Nebraska. At some point down the road, he would meet Wilma, who also lived her entire life in Nebraska, and she was born in 1916. They would go on to have at least 2 kids that I'm aware of. I know that obviously they had Kay, and then Kay had a sister. I don't know if they had more kids. Usually their obituaries will say like how many kids they have, but theirs are relatively blank when it comes to info on them. There is very little information in general on this case. I'm using basically court documents, and so they don't always give you like the background, and it's kind of hard to find on these folks. So I apologize for that. Edwin and Wilma, though, were a very peaceful couple. Their family was also well regarded in the community. They appeared to be a staple of McCook, and just no one could really say anything bad about him. With regards to Kay, and I cannot confirm this with absolute certainty, but There was a book written about this case. The book is called In Cold Storage. In what I was able to sort of read kind of based on this book, no, I have not read the book. I can't read books on every true crime case I covered, or else I'll never be able to tell stories. At any rate, the author allegedly had interviewed Kay's sister. Kay's sister had described Kay as being someone who is extremely manipulative. It sounds like Kay had very erratic behavior, I guess you can call it. There were people who thought she may have had something like bipolar disorder. Again, not confirmed. This is really just more rumors and speculation. But it's information that was written in this book. It sounds like she didn't always get along with her parents, but I don't know if that was anything super crazy that would lead her to want to do anything or do them any harm. I don't know. The court documents don't mention anything about their relationship. Kay would claim that Harold's behavior after the menage a trois ended, that he had become very cuckoo, if you will. He was like putting sugar in her gas tank. He was poisoning her lawn so that the lawn would die. He was, again, going around writing like graffiti on bathroom walls about Kay being this sexual deviant, and he apparently was blackmailing her. It just sounds like when this ended, it became a hot, ugly mess. So when Kay tried taking her own life, and in whatever circumstances led to Kay's parents meeting Harold and Ina, Wilma and Edwin, they just wanted to talk to the couple because they wanted to get to the bottom of this. They wanted to know what was going on. Which brings us to Sunday, September 23rd, 1973. Harold and Ina, that night around 8 p.m., decided to leave their home and drive to the Hoyt house to have a discussion with them about what was going on. They wanted to have the misunderstandings straightened out. Harold decided to take a revolver with him. For what reason? It's unknown, but he brought it with him. He had actually just recently purchased that gun. They arrived at the Hoyt house at approximately 8:30 p.m. that night. Then they spoke for a short amount of time, I guess. What was said in that conversation has not been said out loud, so no one really knows. But this is where, for me, I get kind of confused. But Harold and Ina had told the Hoyts, hey, why don't you guys now come back to our house so we can further the conversation, and we'll have Kay meet us there. I don't know why they needed to move houses, but the Hoyts agreed. And so Harold and the Hoyt couple got into one vehicle together while Ina drove the other vehicle, theirs, to the Nokes house. Shortly after arriving at the Nokes house, apparently Kay had not gotten there yet, but allegedly, this is according to Harold at this point, Edwin became angry at the Nokes couple for the situation in general with regards to their daughter. Now, because of the time of night, Harold says he told Edwin and Wilma, hey, let's go down to my basement because I don't want to, disturb the neighbors if we're going to be yelling, right? So the four of them go down to the basement, and in the basement is like a little bathroom in the corner. So Harold and Edwin go to that bathroom area while the two ladies sit on a couch that's down in the basement. Apparently, there was an argument that broke out between the two men, again, over the issue. When, according to Harold, because we can't question Edwin anymore, Edwin allegedly said, I can't take this shit anymore. He took off his glasses, and then he began to put his fist up as if he was going to punch Harold. Harold had his revolver tucked in his pants. When he says when he saw the fist come up, he took the revolver out and shot Edwin. And Edwin collapsed to the ground immediately, and he was dead. They were within 3 feet of one another. Then Wilma, obviously hearing the altercation and the gunshot, she runs and sees what happens. And I don't know why she screams this. And again, this is only according to Harold. But Wilma screams, "Why didn't you kill Kay?" I don't know why she said that. If she even did, that's what Harold said. And then she began to try to run out of the basement. She goes to the stairs. Harold thinks to himself quickly, well, she's seen what I just done, so now I have to kill her. So he kind of chases her towards the stairs, and as she's only a couple stairs up, he fires the gun at her, and she basically falls and then ends up going backwards, and she falls to the ground dead as well. This is then when Harold and Ina, now they're like, well, shit, what do we do with it? What do we do now? What do we do with the bodies? Uh-oh. According to Harold, he and Ina took basic kitchen knives and they began to slowly dismember both of the bodies. They would take their pieces, their body part pieces, wrap them in like paper that you would wrap like meat up with, right, at a butcher shop. And then they stored all the body parts in their freezer, which is why the book about this thing is called In Cold Storage. They named it after this aspect. They then took the Hoyt's vehicle and they parked it somewhere just away from them, their house, so that way there wasn't any like evidence that the Hoyts were even at their property. This took them basically, I mean, just the entire night. And by the way, Kay, she apparently never got there. That's unclear. It's unclear if Kay ever was at the house. So I don't know where she was. The next day, both Harold and Ina just went to their jobs like nothing had happened. And then after work, Harold took the clothing that they had both been wearing that night. They also had removed the clothing off of both of Edwin and Wilma, and they burned all of the clothing and anything that may have had blood on it in general, and they just threw it into a fire and burnt it all up. Then, that night, they took all of the body parts out of the freezer and loaded them up into their truck. And then they drove to the Harry Strunk Reservoir. For some reason, I was having a really hard time saying that. I guess it's also referred to as Cambridge Lake. They had a boat as well that they had brought along with them. They loaded all the body parts now into the boat, and then they went out onto the water. They then had begun to unwrap the body parts and throw them into the lake, but then they just stopped unwrapping them and just threw them in there with the paper and everything. They kind of tried to scatter them sort of just around in different places. They then started a fire near the lake, and whatever wrappings they kept that they took off, they then burned all of those, and then burned the clothing they were wearing to dispose of the body parts. Apparently, a few days later, Harold had gone back down to the lake to kind of look around the area to check, and he said a couple of the body parts had floated up to the shore, and they were still there. So he took some like large rocks and basically tied them up to the parts and so that they would sink to the bottom. Edwin and Wilma Hoyt would be reported missing by their family members, friends, and co-workers. And the investigation into their disappearance didn't initially yield much results. But then there were more body parts that began to wash up on the shores of the lake/reservoir. And this time Harold hadn't been able to hide them again. They found enough parts to determine that there were two people, at least, and they were later then identified as that of Wilma and Edwin Hoyt. When the body parts were found, this is apparently when Kay came forward to police to suggest that their killers may have been at least Harold Nokes, maybe Ina. She then divulged the information about the affair, and she gave them all the dirty secrets, the police. On December 20th, 1973, after a brief investigation into Harold and Ina, based on information they got from Kay, Harold Nokes was arrested, brought into a interrogation room, and he was questioned. At first, he wouldn't admit to anything, didn't say anything, nothing. But he would finally, cave in a short time later. On January 4th, 1974, Harold would finally confess. And everything I had just told you about what happened that night was the account of what Harold had initially told police on that January 4th. He would go on to plead guilty. He had been charged with first-degree murder, and this would, I guess, at some point down the road became a very heated discussion during his appeals. But first of all, he pleaded guilty to the murders, and he ended up getting 2 life sentences. So down the road, he would appeal, stating that the first-degree murder, because he was convicted of one first-degree murder, and then the other was second-degree murder. The reason why he would appeal, and it would have been fruitless anyway, but I guess it was more of the principle of the matter, is that the first-degree murder charge to him and his lawyers meant that Harold had planned this ahead of time, because usually first-degree murder is something that they can prove was planned, premeditated, where second-degree murder is something that is you knowingly and intentionally committed murder, but it wasn't necessarily planned. So they're basically trying to argue semantics at this point, because he's not getting at, regardless if the first-degree murder sentence was changed to second-degree murder, he would still be in prison for life without parole. They wanted to say that, well, he didn't plan this. This was a spur of the moment, in the heat of the argument kind of thing. My issue, as well as the prosecution, is you could reasonably determine that this was planned because Harold had brought a gun with him when they went to the Hoyt house. That does suggest that he may have intended to possibly use it. And then he got them to go to their house and then brought them down to the basement where it was quieter. That all implies, or can at least be looked at as this was planned. And even if you want to say, okay, he killed Edwin out of just pure reaction, okay. But the other one, Wilma, he even said, well, she's seen what I've done, so now I have to kill her. It happens quickly. Premeditation doesn't mean you planned it for 3 months or 3 days. It could mean that you literally planned to kill her for the purpose of hiding your previous crime. That's considered premeditation. So nothing was ever reversed. His charges stayed. In terms of Ina, she was sentenced to just 5 years in prison for wrongful disposal of human remains. She only served a couple of years and was released, and then she spent the rest of her life living a totally normal life. Again, where was Kay in all of this? Still unknown. She was the one to give police the information about Harold, which would eventually lead to the arrest and the charges and all that. The author that I mentioned who wrote the book on this case, he had done a lot of investigation into this. He did a lot of research into this. He spoke to the people of the area of the time. He did a lot of legwork into it. There are rumblings and rumors that Kay may have actually been way more involved in this than ever initially even thought of. That given her manipulative behavior, her mental health issues, she somehow may have orchestrated this. But there is no proof. Zero proof. No physical evidence. There really isn't even any circumstantial evidence, no witness statements to state that she ever had involvement in this. All it really is just gut feelings and speculation. That's it. But you can't use that in the court of law. You have to have proof. We can't just guess and say things and boom, it's true. you're convicted of a crime because we just thought you may have done something. But like, then I think to myself, what was Harold's motive in all of this? Like, if this was premeditated, which it looks like it was, why? Why would Harold want to premeditate the murders of Kay's parents, people he really had never truly met before? The only person who could have had a foreseeable motive would have been Kay, because she had a rocky history with her parents, and just because of her kind of unstable behavior. But she also didn't get anything from it. There was, like, from what I can tell, there was no insurance money. So, again, all speculative. There's no proof. But I'm lost on what the motive would be if this was premeditated. This is just very bizarre, because it has all of the elements to prove a premeditated murder, but it also has a lot of elements to show that this was a spur of the moment, heat of the moment killing. I mean, don't get me wrong, Harold deserved to be in prison for 2 life sentences, because he did murder 2 people, and one of them for sure we know he did with intent and purpose. But like I said, the only reason I'm going on about this is because if this was planned, that suggests that someone else may have been involved in this, and that someone else basically got away with it. But I don't know. It's weird to me. This is just a weird one to me. Harold was interviewed in prison many years later, sometime when he was like in his mid-80s. And this was by the author of that book. Harold made changes to his story. He basically told the author that he wasn't really as involved in this supposed 3-way. As a matter of fact, there wasn't even 3-way. His wife wasn't even involved. Never. His wife never participated. Okay? Even though initially, back in the 1973, he did say she did, and Kay said she did. He even said in this interview that Ina had nothing to do with disposing of the body, she had nothing to do with cutting up the body, even though back then he said she participated in it. He then told the author, you know what, after the 2 murders, I just completely blacked out. But I can tell you with certainty that Ina had no involvement. But I blacked out. So which is it? Did he change his story to protect Ina? Was Ina more involved in this than initially thought? We'll never know. We will never know. Ina died in April of 2021 at the age of 91. She lived the rest of her life as a well-beloved and loving mother, grandmother, and just had a totally normal life. Harold died in prison of natural causes in 2017. So the truth of what happened that night, exactly the truth, and if anyone else was involved, will probably never be known. But what we do know is that the person who pulled the trigger and committed the murders was convicted and spent the rest of their life in prison. And those are the facts, and that's what we have to go off of, is facts, things that can be proven. It all just seemed so completely senseless and just good old-fashioned stupid. Because it sounds like the Hoyts were really just wanting to protect their daughter, and that's essentially what they died doing, trying to protect their daughter and just make sure that their daughter was going to be okay. But that is it for this case. I hope you found it interesting. They had a body, they identified that body, and it turns out it wasn't that person at all. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Ellis Green. Viewer discretion is advised. It was April 16th, 1988, a little after 7 o'clock in the morning. Glendale, California police and fire are given a call from a local doctor's office that a man is deceased in the office. This was at the office of Dr. Richard Boggs. When paramedics entered the exam room, they found a man lying on the ground, clearly was not alive anymore. Dr. Boggs identified this man, said he was Melvin Eugene Hansen. He had come into the office that morning complaining of severe chest pains. And then he just sort of dropped dead. He said that Mr. Hansen had been his patient for the past 7 or 8 years or so, and he had a history of heart issues. Dr. Boggs said he gave an EKG to Mr. Hansen at approximately a little after 5 o'clock in the morning that same day. And he even showed them the EKG strips. He says after he gave him the EKG, he left the office and let Mr. Hansen just sort of sit in the exam room for a few minutes when all of a sudden they heard a loud thud come from that exam room. They go in there and they see that Mr. Hansen is now on the ground, not responsive, not breathing. Dr. Boggs said he initially called 911, but he said that he received a busy tone when he called 911. Police at that point were like, that's a little strange. I don't know why at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning there would be a busy signal. That's never happened before. And they thought the story seemed a little just odd. There was no photo ID on the corpse. However, what they did find on him were credit cards that had Melvin Hansen's name, as well as a birth certificate, which was also very unusual to police because who on earth just carries around their birth certificate? Dr. Boggs told police if you want to speak to someone, in Mr. Hansen's life, here's the number for his business partner, John Hawkins. Now, Dr. Boggs is this really well-respected doctor in the area. The police knew him. They just felt his story seemed strange, but they weren't really pressing it much. At any rate, they reach out to Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins comes in to identify the body, and he also confirms that body is Melvin Hansen. What was strange is that Melvin Hansen is a 46-year-old man, but the man they had in the exam room just looks a lot younger than 46 to them. John Hawkins and Melvin Hansen, they co-owned a very successful clothing store there in Glendale, California. John Hawkins also had business kind of around the country, and at the time of Melvin's passing, John Hawkins was actually in Ohio, so he had to fly out in order to ID the body. So they know that John Hawkins was definitely not in California. They can confirm he was in Ohio when Melvin drops dead in the exam room. John Hawkins apparently was the one who was going to be executing Mr. Hansen's will, and he had the remains cremated. Thankfully, before they cremated the remains, they actually took the deceased fingerprints and got DNA and stuff from them. 2 months later, in June of 1988, Glendale police, the detective involved with this particular case, was notified by the insurance company that John Hawkins was going to be awarded a $1 million life insurance policy that was on Melvin Hansen. The insurance company was requesting from police photos of the deceased. The insurance company had a photocopy of Mr. Hansen's identification. And so they sent that to the Glendale police, and Glendale police had a photograph of the corpse from the exam room. It was not the same person. It was more than obvious this was not the same man. The body in that exam room was in fact not Melvin Eugene Hansen. It was someone different. But here's the thing, Dr. Boggs and John Hawkins both said that's definitely Melvin Hansen. What's going on here? Now, Melvin Hansen also had a California driver's license, and there was at that time, everyone would have a thumbprint on their driver's license. And so they had taken the fingerprints from the corpse from the exam room and compared it to the thumbprint found on the ID was not the same fingerprint. This was not the guy. Who was this body? Well, they would find out it took them a while because this was the 80s and 90s where you couldn't plug a fingerprint into the database and boom, you get a match. It took them some time, but they were able to actually identify the fingerprints from the corpse. And it turns out it was a man named Ellis Henry Green. He was a 32-year-old man who worked as a bookkeeper there in the Glendale area at the time. Well, they found out when they got these fingerprints compared that Mr. Greene was reported missing, and his car had later been found at a nearby airport. People thought he just picked up and left. Once police go to Mr. Hawkins and say, hey, listen, you ID'd this person you claimed is your business partner and very good friend, but it's definitely not him. What's going on? And John Hawkins doubles down and says, no, that was him. That was Melvin that you guys found in that exam room. Dr. Boggs says that's Melvin. Police are like, no, it's not. The fingerprint does not match. The photographs clearly are two very different people. What is happening here? Police are examining the phone records of Dr. Boggs, of John Hawkins, and also of Melvin Hansen. And they found in call logs that those three men, one of them supposedly now a corpse, but isn't, they were in direct communication with each other for several days. They also, in those phone logs, found the records of a man named Wolfgang von Snowden. Very fancy name. Well, on January 29th, 1989, at the Dallas, Texas International Airport, a man is taken in based on some suspicions they had of him. And on this man, they found IDs with this Wolfgang name on it. And they found $14,000 in cash that this man was carrying around in a duffel bag. And as they're searching this man's bag, they found an ID. This ID had the name Ellis Henry Green on it. And it had a photo of the person they now know was the corpse in the exam room. The Dallas police were able to connect the police in California because of, I think, warrants and stuff. Because at that point, they knew that Melvin Hansen, in fact, was not likely dead, or he was a suspect in this or something. And once they begin to question this man, they stop at the airport, they get the ID out, they do all this stuff. They actually find out that the man they're talking to is not a man named Wolfgang. This is Melvin Hansen. At that point, Melvin Hansen is detained and brought back to California, and John Hawkins is also arrested because at the very least, you have some kind of insurance fraud scheme going on here. Something the coroner would state when they first did the exam on this corpse in the exam room was that they initially believed that he died of some sort of heart issue. His blood alcohol level was also at 0.29, which was above the legal limit. And now that they have all of these other names kind of out there and they're kind of piecing this together kind of slowly, they also look at the EKG slips because he had stated, Dr. Boggs had stated, I did an EKG on who he said was Melvin at 5 o'clock in the morning. Well, it turns out as they line up all these EKG things, they can get timestamps and all that. They realized that EKG machine hadn't been used since before midnight. So he lied about doing an EKG at 5 o'clock in the morning. John Hawkins manages to escape custody and he goes on the run. In 1991, America's Most Wanted airs this case to have anyone out there, try to find John Hawkins. And a woman calls in and says, I think that's my boyfriend, or a former boyfriend of hers. And she was actually calling all the way from Italy. So police go to Italy and they confirm that the man in Italy is in fact John Hawkins. They arrest him again and they bring him back to the States. And he is now at this point charged with insurance fraud. And now, looking at the coroner's report and some information they found in there, they actually can determine that it's actually quite possible that Ellis was actually smothered to death. Now, they don't have his body anymore because he'd been cremated. However, the coroner took such good notes and detailed notes and basically wrote down everything. And having other people look at this, and they could determine that in actuality, Ellis was very much suffocated. He didn't just die of a simple heart attack. Ellis was just 32 years old at the time, and people who in their 30s can have heart attacks, but it's not very common. And so now they believe they have a murder on our hands, and they have an insurance fraud plus a murder. And now they believe, so obviously John Hawkins has to be involved somehow. They know he did not commit the murder physically, but they were able to connect him through phone logs and other means to Dr. Boggs and the real Melvin Hansen. They can, at that point, place Melvin Hansen still in Glendale, California when this death occurred. So what they believe happened is that Ellis was found by these men because maybe he had a similar likeness to Melvin, And in order to collect $1 million on the life insurance policy, they would kill this Ellis person, pose him as Melvin. I don't know how they thought they were going to get away with this, and then collect the $1 million life insurance policy. And Melvin now has himself a new identity, and he'll be living out of the country. That was the plan, but it all fell apart. I don't know how they weren't expecting police to kind of put this together and go, wait a minute, that's not who you say it is. Dr. Boggs went on trial, and he was found guilty of murder for financial gain, and also conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Melvin Hansen was arrested and charged with the murder and conspiracy to commit murder. He was also found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without parole. John Hawkins went on trial for conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. He was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He has since been released. Dr. Boggs died in prison in 2003. Hansen died in prison in 2016. All of this to get $1 million life insurance policy. They murdered a man in order to do that, which is one of the most disturbing and disgusting things you could do. Just pick a random subject. Hey, you kind of look like me. Now we're going to kill this person just so we can get some money off of it. In the end, they found out who the man really was, who the corpse was in the exam room, and they found out all the parties involved. And so Ellis Green was able to get the justice he very rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case. True crime, Aruni, Dooney, Jingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube. I tell many of them a week. So please subscribe, give the video a like, leave a comment, share the video so that way more people can see it. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified of when I post new videos. Please watch them all the way through. I would appreciate it. Tell your friends, tell your wife, tell your husbands, tell your uncles, your aunts, your other folks in your life. What? Okay, stop. Anyway, I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. The link to my TikTok is in the link tree, which is in the description of this video below. Feel free to follow that. I do post TikTok compilation videos, though, at the beginning of every month on here. And then also in that link tree, you'll find my case list. The cases are listed alphabetically. There's about 7,000, close to 7,000 names on there. So if you don't see a name on that list and you want me to cover it, just send me a quick email. My email is listed below. I will then add the name to my list. I pick my cases at random, unless if you are a loved one who is has a victim who is an unsolved murder or a missing person, let me know in the email that you are a loved one, and I can make sure that case gets a higher priority. So, at any rate, that is it for this video, True Crime Rudy. So until the next case, ta-ta, for now. Ugh.